All right. What is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. Per the usual, I'm your host, Coach JK McLeod. We are kicking off another Tuesday fitness focus episode of Help Me Understand. Today, we're going pretty much Q&A style. I've got a question about logging weights when you're using the Smith machine. There is a question that someone posed that really there's not enough information to give an answer to, and that's actually going to be what I'm going to talk about when it comes to that particular question. It was a question about, I will pull this back up very quickly. It was a question about, let's see, this is starting off really well. Yeah, a question about uh, some suggestions for being able to burn fat, and they had mentioned that they were at 37% body fat percentage and a couple of other things. I'm actually going to share a perspective with you on where what I hear when I get a question like that. Then I am going to answer a question about where to start with cardio equipment if you are investing in your home gym. And then the last thing that I've got on the rundown for today is sharing my take on the complication of calories in and calories out. Yeah, we're going to get there. We're going to go there. However, before getting into the meat of today's episode, I, as always, want to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. I know that you have plenty of podcast content that you do consume. So I truly, truly, truly never take it for granted that you chose to include the Help Me Understand podcast in hopefully your weekly listening rotation. I also will have a special announcement coming up at the end of today's podcast about the future of Help Me Understand. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's get into what we've got on deck. So first question was about Smith machines, logging weights with the Smith machines. So the question was, if I put two 45-pound plates on a Smith machine for bench press, am I lifting 225 pounds, or what is the actual weight? Because the bar isn't 45 pounds given the assistance. This is a common question that comes up for folks that will work out in gyms that have a Smith machine. For those who may not be totally familiar with what I'm talking about with a Smith machine machine describes a rack, so similar to a squat rack. The difference is that this has a barbell attached to it. So there are two vertical tracks, like sliding tracks, where the barbell is fixed to those tracks, and that barbell will move up and down. So when you're doing a bench press, the weight is not the weight of the bar maybe 45 pounds. However, because it's attached to the two vertical tracks and you slide that up and down, it is very similar to if you had someone on either side of the bar offering some level of assistance with pressing that bar up, and then you, for the most part, are controlling it as it comes down. So the question that this person posed, which is, again, a very common question, is, am I really lifting 225 pounds if I put 45 pounds, two 45-pound plates on either side? And the answer is no. And also, let me provide some context there. At the end of the day, my strong recommendation for anyone who I'm working with or asks this particular questions is to keep it very simple and log the weight of the plates that you added to that particular machine. Here's the reason why. Unless you are specifically training for something like a bench press event, a powerlifting event where you will need to bench press, or anything along those particular lines, then it won't make a difference. Primarily the folks that I will observe and interact with who are getting really down to the nitty gritty of whether or not to count the bar as 15 pounds or 45 pounds and different things like that are spending mental calories on something that it's not going to make a difference at the end of the day. Another reason that, so one would be you're not competing, so it's not that serious at the end of the day. So in order to stay consistent with progressive overload over time, week over week, month over month, training block over training block, if you are consistently going to have any sort of Smith machine movement, so we're talking bench press, we're talking squat, we're maybe talking a bent over row, those are the shoulder press, military shoulder press. Those are the primary ones that first come to mind when we talk about movements that you do with the Smith machine. I struggle to think of a scenario where it's the end all be all to make sure that you know exactly how much assistance you're getting and the weight of the bar and all of that stuff, unless you're specifically training for a competition. And if you are training for a competition where you have that movement, then you need to be training somewhere where you can get access to free weights, because while I will readily admit that I haven't seen everything that's out there, I am still waiting to come across a powerlifting meet. Oh, sorry about that. We got to turn on Do Not Disturb. I'm still waiting to come across a powerlifting meet that utilizes Smith machines for any of the movements. I haven't yet. If you do, let me know. Like, help a brother out here. So that's one. The second thing is also, as long as you stay consistent with the machine that you use and logging the weights that you add to that machine, then you're able to track that progression over time just fine, just as well as you would if it was if they were free weights. So you're doing completely fine there, because the primary reason for tracking those things is to be able to get an understanding of what your progressions are. Maybe it helps you get an understanding of how much weight to use to start off. Now, the last thing that I will say on this is not all Smith machines are built equally. So if you are posing that particular question, and this will actually relate to the third thing, or the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is basically helping people understand how to get better at asking questions. If you are posing that particular question out into especially the social media universe, and ask, hey, how much should I log for the bar if I'm using a Smith machine? And people are just willy-nilly out here answering the question, that shows either a lack of exposure to different machines, or they just really have no idea what they're talking about just in general, because all Smith machines are not created equal. There are particular gyms that I will go to. In fact, one of the gyms that I go to when I visit Alabama has at least 2, they might even have 3 different Smith machines. None of them are designed exactly the same. And there are even some where the vertical track will actually come out some. So you can actually, it's hard to describe visually, but the bar is attached to the vertical tracks, and that will slide up and down, and you can also move it forward and backward. It just stays attached the entire time. In this particular gym, it has 2 Smith machines, and neither one of them is designed, they're not designed the same way. So if I were to say 15 pounds for the one, that's not the same necessarily for the other one, and sometimes they're not even labeled. So to keep it simple and not complicate this and have this make sense, if you use the Smith machine, my strong recommendation for you is to simply log the weights that you are adding to the bar in your notes section, or however you typically log that, and make your life simple. Like, keep it super simple. All right, there we go. That's the Smith machine. All right, second on the list is, or actually I'm going to do the third one first. So I'm going to do this next one. The question that was posed is, which would you pick for at-home fitness? Stationary bike, treadmill, or rowing machine? I'm tired of paying for a gym membership. I want the comfort of home. Thanks. Okay, my response to this was that I would pick a treadmill if I've got the option of a stationary bike, a treadmill, or a rowing machine. I'm also going to include a ski erg in there. For those who might be familiar with that, those have gained, I believe, more popularity recently with the rise of interest in high rocks competitions. So if you're choosing between stationary bike, treadmill, rowing machine, ski erg, which one would you pick for the comfort of home? For myself, I would, both myself and for just about everybody else, without having any further information, I generally would recommend a treadmill for a couple of reasons. I think that that provides really easy access. First of all, to being able to to get steps in, provides very easy access. It removes the barriers of weather constraints. That's probably one of the main things. It removes the barriers of weather constraints. And also, if you are somebody who wants to run, so it makes walking easier, and again removes those barriers. If you are someone who wants to run, it also allows you to do that. And it's for my taste, it is your best option for being able to stay consistent with getting a good amount of movement in from low intensity to high intensity, regardless of what the outside conditions are. So I say that as someone from the perspective of someone who has lived in primarily, like during the winter, very cold climates. I have lived in New York, Connecticut, Michigan, Missouri, and now Illinois. So I'm primarily first going to pick out what is the piece of equipment that will allow me to stay consistent with some form of cardio through all the seasons. Now, second on that list for me would be the stationary bike, whether that be a spin bike or a Concept 2 bike erg or an assault bike. I don't think you can necessarily see it if you're watching this on video. I have a Schwinn, an old school Schwinn Airdyne that I have here if I'm trying to do cardio in a pinch. My son has used it occasionally also. So the bike would be second, because I'm also thinking about, and this goes back to the treadmill, I'm also thinking about things like what piece of equipment would allow me, again, to do not just high intensity, also, and maybe even primarily more low to moderate intensity. If you are watching this on video, whether it's on Spotify or on YouTube, behind me is a standing desk. So if you have something like a treadmill, then you can, provided that you've got the right setup for the standing desk, that also allows you the opportunity to be able to work, take calls, do different things like that as you get in some light steps somewhere in a zone 1 to zone 2 range on the treadmill. So that would be my number one choice. Then I would go bike. Then I would go between rower and ski erg. Ooh, that's a tough one. I'd say rower and then ski erg last. Now, if you're somebody who happens to follow me on Instagram, for a lot of my cardio days, I will pick the ski erg when I'm looking for something that is quick, down and dirty, 20 to 30, maybe 40 seconds at a time. I really, really enjoy the ski erg. Previous to that, it had been the rower, but once we got access to a ski erg, I was pretty much sold on that. The rower, I think, is a better full body workout because you get that pull, the upper body pull. You get a little bit of a hinge as long as you're rowing correctly. And then you do get a lower body push, again, if you're rowing correctly. So short answer, or long answer to a short question, I would say starting off with the treadmill for those reasons that I stated. Okay, third on the list, this question that was posed. Okay, this one's from Threads. It said, gym community, my muscle percentage is 37%, but my body fat percentage is also 37%. I've been training for 4 years. Please, does anyone know how I can burn those fatty cells? I want to be lean, but it feels so easy to give up. I need a game changer or maybe some emotional support from you guys. Okay. My intention with bringing this one up is not actually to answer the question about some different tips on what this particular person can do in order to burn more body fat based on them being at 37% body fat and 37% muscle. I'm going to read you my response that I actually wrote here. And my intention was to be helpful. The response that I posted is, you're going to get a lot of replies here. And actually, as of when I screenshot this, and this was a couple of days, this was yesterday. When I screenshot it, there were already 79 replies. My response was, you're going to get a lot of replies here. Before you implement anything, see if anyone is taking time to understand more about the info you presented. Respectfully, someone who is truly helpful will first work to help you understand the information you interpreted for yourself. And they responded, OMG, yes, this is so true. Basically, there's a lot of body types out there and they need different approaches to achieve the goals. And I just left it at that. Here is what I want to share with you based on this question. And again, just to recap, the person stated my muscle percentage is at 37%, my body fat percentage is at 37%. Also, and I've been training for 4 years. Somebody help me figure out how I can burn more fat. I won't die on this hill. I will sign a long-term lease on it though. When folks chime in to answer questions like that and ask zero, I mean like 0.00% free financing, no questions to get an understanding on where this information came from, as far as being at 37% body fat and 37% muscle. When someone is responding to that and not asking a single question about where those numbers came from, all I hear afterwards is like the teacher from Charlie Brown, like the wah, 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 because the answer might make you feel good for a minute. It might make you think that. So say if somebody was like, hey, and I bet you if I went in, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to spend the mental calories on this. I am reasonably certain that if I go into the comments to see what they are right now, it's probably over 100 comments at this point, and they are likely talking about things like particular styles of diets. It is probably talking about potentially upping your cardio some, and continuing to lift weights. There's likely, in fact, one of the responses I saw was definitely a copy paste from like a Chat GPT sort of deal. Like once you've been in chat, and I use Chat GPT show, that's what I call my assistant, Chat GPT show. I've utilized her for assistance with trying to like flesh out different thoughts and organize things and things like that. So I am well acquainted with certain instances being able to quickly spot how responses are being put together, even when it says, when you put in prompts like match my vibe and the things that I usually say and things like that. There are a host of different answers that are most likely to be in there. I'm not a betting person. If I was, I would bet at least $3.50 that there are responses in there that are from folks who think that they're being helpful. But the first place that I want to start is, okay, I hear what you're saying. So it sounds like you've been training for 4 years. In order to be really helpful, first, help me understand, where did this information come from as far as 37% body fat and 37% muscle? Did it come from a DEXA? Did it come from calipers? Did it come from plugging information in on the internet about your height, your waist, your weight, and your waist size or your midsection size? And it was some sort of algorithm that gave you an assumption of what your body fat percentage was. Those are things that actually exist. And these are not completely crazy, like extreme one-offs. These are things that folks are doing out there. I won't say fairly regularly. I'm just going to say this is not unheard of for folks to just type things in to particular quizzes or GPTs or whatever, online calculators, and they are given this information. Maybe they even went to the doctor and the doctor gave them, like, did some sort of a test and gave them some information and said, yeah, you're at about 37% body fat. First, I want to understand, where did this information come from? That helps me understand at least, like, what are we working with here? Then these are just coming straight off the dome. Then I would want to get an understanding of what have the last, at minimum, the last 60 days looked like for you, from an activity standpoint, from a nutrition standpoint, and from a sleep standpoint. You say you've been training for 4 years. Somebody saying that they've been training for 4 years doesn't tell you a whole lot of anything at all. So yes, there are going to be probably 98% of the comments that are going to provide us with this feeling that we're getting help. And at the end of the day, or at the end of that thread, we're still going to be taking a series of left turns, also known as just being stuck on the hamster wheel. And my point to this, so that I can end this rant to get into another one, is we need to get better at asking questions. We are getting answers to the questions that we ask. So, primarily, the coaches that I collaborate with and I talk to and that I will link my name to are one of the reasons that I rock with those folks is because they are really, really, really good at listening to the initial information that they're given and the question that's posed. And then they'll ask a follow up question so that they can get an understanding of what the person is truly trying to communicate. And this is even where I think that AI and you specifically asking agents like Claude, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Microsoft Copilot. I mean, there's a plethora of options that are out there. And again, I use some of them, primarily ChatGPT, starting to get into Claude. The quality of the information that you get, and let me say in this specific instance, when it comes to fitness related things, the quality and usefulness of the information that you will get will 100% depend on the quality of the information that you give. So if you are asking questions without providing any sort of context into where you got the information from and what your pattern has been leading up to the information that you got, then you're going to get an answer that is going to sound fantastic. It'll likely even give you one or two things that you can immediately go implement. And then after that, you're going to be wondering, man, well, wait, like I asked the question, I got a specific answer, but it's still not working. And the number hasn't changed or it hasn't gone in the specific direction that I wanted and all these other things. And it's going to come back to the fact that we've got to get better at asking questions. And that still remains something that I think is best left to human communication and interaction. Okay. Now let's move on to the last one. The last one is my attempt to provide an analogy for the calories in, calories out. Like, does it work and different things like that. Some context here is being exposed to no shortage of posts and the ebb and flow of, I don't know if it's rage bait or whatever it is. There's the two sides that primarily seem to form. You've got the folks that are like, hey, calories in, calories out is the end all be all. That is it. Like, it's very simple. If you want to lose weight, you need to be in a calorie deficit. Anybody who says that they haven't lost weight hasn't been in a calorie deficit. Period. Point blank. That's it. Then you've got this other side that is going to say anybody who says that calories in, calories out is all that matters doesn't understand hormones. It's more likely than not some dude who thinks that he understands what's going on when he coaches females, but he doesn't understand perimenopause, he doesn't understand menopause, and all those other things. I have both observed, interacted, participated in conversations, arguments, the whole thing on both with both sides of it. My take, or the analogy that I want to bring to you, is that something can be an equation, which I'm going to call calories in, calories out, an equation. In order to lose weight, I do believe that in order to lose weight, that you have to be in some sort of calorie deficit. That does not automatically mean, and this is where the folks who will say that calorie deficit doesn't work for some people, this is what they'll hop onto And this has been what's been presented to me. So I'm not trying to present their argument for them. This is specifically what they have told me, is when I and other coaches will say something like, in order to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit. They will say, so what you're saying, or some form of this, they'll say, so what you're saying is that hormones don't matter. No, I'm not saying that. Oh, so what you're saying is that if somebody's says that they're in a calorie deficit, then they're lying. No, I'm not saying that. I am saying that I do believe that the equation is calories in and calories out. I also believe that there is a lot more complexity to truly understanding how many calories are being expended, and a lot more complexity to truly understanding how many calories are being taken in. So the analogy that I will give, and I will bring this episode to a close. I wanted to keep it under 32 minutes, and by my timer, about 6 minutes away. The analogy that I will give is here's actually the analogy I'll use, because I was going to use the analogy of a road trip. So in order for me to get from my house in Illinois to my parents' house in Alabama, I want to say it's like 660 miles to get from door to door. I think I checked it one time. Let's say 660. It is 660 miles. In order to get from where I am to where I want to go, to my parents' house, I will have to travel 660 miles. There is no, if I'm driving, specifically, if I'm driving, that is an equation. I will need to drive 660 miles to get there. What that doesn't tell you is there are some complexities to that. You could tell me, hey, it will take a tank and a half of gas to get down there. Well, that makes the assumption that I'm driving a fairly fuel efficient car. I actually did that a few weeks ago. I rented a very fuel efficient car, and I was able to go all the way down, all 660 miles, on a tank and a half of gas. Now, someone else who has a less fuel efficient car, in fact, at the car rental place, they actually offered me a quote unquote nicer luxury vehicle at no additional cost. And the guy thought that I was absolutely crazy when I said, appreciate you, bruh. No, keep me with the very sensible, I think it was a Nissan Sentra. I was like, keep me with the Nissan Sentra. He said, are you sure, my man? Because I can upgrade you to this luxury premium SUV. I was traveling by myself. But he was like, you'll be riding in style, and I will literally not charge you a single dollar more. It'll be the same, very reasonable price, by the way. Shout out Enterprise Rent-A-Car. The very same reasonable price for this other one. I said, nah, specifically because gas prices are wild right now. So I will take the more fuel efficient vehicle because I know that I won't have to spend as much on gas for this 660 mile road trip. Now, if I had picked the other vehicle, gas was going to be more expensive. I was going to have to use more gas to go the same distance because different engine, different vehicle, different load. That is an analogy that I would like to present when it comes to hopefully opening up some additional understanding and perspective on talking about the calories in, calories out argument. Before somebody comes for me, and you're going to come for me anyway, I am not trying to compare females' hormones to a vehicle. Just gave me flashbacks of like that R. Kelly song back in the day. You remind me of my Jeep. Like, no, that is not what I'm trying to do. I am, however, trying to provide different ways to think through and just share a different perspective on what I'm saying when I say it is an equation, and also there are complex pieces to that equation. Again, same thing as that trip is 660 miles for the route, assuming both cars take that route. You can certainly go different ways, but both cars take the same route. The cars are built differently. So one may be able to do it more or less efficiently than the other. That means, so same thing when it comes to thinking about calories in, calories out, one body will likely be able to operate in a deficit or figure out what it will take to be in that deficit a little bit easier than the other body that will not be able to figure it out as easy. And it will be potentially more difficult. It may be even more complex. When you are working with folks who are in menopause, perimenopause, or any other sorts of factors that are there that need to be considered, those are things that make a scenario more complex. There are more pieces to the equation. So that's just what I want to end on here, is my take on calories in, calories out, that perspective that, yes, I believe that it's an equation. And also I also strongly believe that there are different pieces to that particular equation. Okay. With that, one quick announcement. For the month of June, we are in June right now. For the month of June, Tuesday episodes are going to be fitness focused. Friday episodes are going to be a wild card, possibly not even fitness related. I am going to, in July, be launching a rebrand or a re-engagement and refocus for Help Me Understand. The reason that I mention that is if you really, really enjoy the Tuesday episodes, excuse me, of Help Me Understand, then stick with me through the month of June. And if you want to stay tuned to me and the content that I put out, specifically the podcast content, specifically only for fitness, then there will be a new podcast for you to follow. It's going to be called Make Fitness Make Sense with Coach J.K. McLeod. That's me. So that will be starting in July. So fitness content through the month of July. Tuesdays on the Help Me Understand podcast, we're talking all about fitness, habits, and nutrition. Starting in July, those episodes, I will be primarily talking fitness over on the Make Fitness Make Sense podcast. If you would like to stay connected with me for things outside of fitness, general lifestyle stuff that's going on, pop culture, news, politics, my take on those things, and conversations. I'm already lining up conversations for a re-engagement of what the Help Me Understand podcast initially was all about prior to really skewing things more towards fitness. And again, I'll be doing some Friday episodes here. Then keep subscribing. Stay tuned with the Help Me Understand podcast, because in July, the Help Me Understand podcast will re-engage back to our roots, which is sharing context, perspective, nuance, and opinions on the things that we experience in everyday life. So for the month of June, for most of the month of June, don't need to do anything differently. Tune in on Tuesdays for fitness. Tune in on Fridays for a free-for-all, just chatting about random things and my perspective. So stay tuned. New podcast coming. Make Fitness Make Sense. All right. That's going to be the end of today's episode. So thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Help Me Understand. If you've got comments, questions, feedback, anything like that, shoot me a message. I'm on Instagram at Coach JK McLeod. That's MCLEOD. You also can email me, jk@jkmcleod.com. Both of those pieces of information will be in the show notes. Thank you. I appreciate you. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye now.